Hello and welcome to Legal Thinking with me, Liam Pape.
And me, Ed Wootton.
Ed, how are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. Just recovering from the Jubilee weekend. So,
of course. Did you do much for the Jubilee?
Just a lot of relaxing. So, getting back to work was quite difficult, as you can tell from the fact that we didn't have a podcast last week.
But I'm sure that's what the Queen would have wanted.
Oh, absolutely.
Was to relax rather than...
yeah, she needs a break.
Indeed. It was a long bank holiday, so we thought we'd give our listeners a rest as well. In this week's episode, we're going to be talking about a few stories that lawyers from RWK Goodman have been working on. I say stories, some of them are articles in newspapers, some of them are pieces of thought leadership we've put out, and some of them are cases that some of our lawyers have been working on as well. And they're really interesting, and the plan for this episode is just to give you an outline of what some of those are and where you can find out some more about them, because there is a wide variety of subjects that we have going.
Absolutely. And I think the place to start would be rwkgoodman.com/info-hub if you want to kind of, find the articles while you're listening as well.
Indeed. So there's a lot there.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'll crack on. The first one that I'd like to call out involves someone being called out in the wrong way. The title of the article is "Can Calling a Man Bald Amount to Sex-Related Harassment?" It's by Luke Mitchell and Lauren Harkin. You may have already heard the story. It was a chap who worked for the British Bung Company for almost 24 years, at which point someone called him a bald unmentionable. Basically, he brought her a harassment claim, saying that it, violated his dignity, creating an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating, or offensive environment for him. And actually, he was successful with his claim in the employment tribunal. I think what Luke Mitchell and Lauren Harkin wanted to stress, as you're reading the article, is that the case shows the wide scope of harassment claims related to sex and other protected characteristics under the Equality Act, and it demonstrates that standalone comments or actions can amount to harassment. Employers therefore need to be careful when matters of this kind arise and should investigate thoroughly to best protect themselves in the event of a tribunal claim.
Indeed. It's interesting that the takeaway is that employers need to be careful when, of course, this was an insult. For me, the interesting thing was the issue isn't with the swear. It's more so with the accusation or the insult of baldness. And kind of the thing that is really interesting about this is that it counts as harassment on the grounds of sex, because they made the case that baldness is much more prevalent in men than it is women. So calling someone bald is inherently related to sex.
Yeah, it's obviously not as it seems at face value. I think a lot of people, Joe average like me, would probably be a bit confused by that story, but actually...
Well, I mean, you wouldn't understand. You have a luscious head of hair.
Well, that is very true. So, yeah, I could never understand, fortunately, in some ways. But, yeah, I think Luke and Lauren do a really good job of breaking it down and helping to understand, why the case came about as it did.
Yeah, I mean, and the last part of that is that the tribunal is still yet to decide on the amount of compensation that will be awarded to Mr. Finn. So it'll be interesting to see, exactly how much he is entitled to.
Yeah. Okay, so Liam, what have you been looking at?
Well, eagle-eared listeners, which I'm sure isn't even a phrase, of our podcast will remember that a few weeks ago we spoke to Catherine Hawkes about various issues relating to the menopause and the workplace and what employers and bosses and line managers can do to better support people who are going through the menopause. Anyway, Catherine Hawkes spoke to a journalist from the newspaper on the 15th of June about this issue. And the article was about how the menopause can cause financial hardship for women. And in this piece, she basically talks about how the unfair treatment of women with the menopause may include being put on performance management plans or being the butt of office jokes. And this can often lead to women quitting or feeling devalued, and often at the peak of their careers as well. I mean, it's that old cliche that a man gets wiser with age, but for some reason we seem to value women less as they age. But anyway, so if they face this kind of discrimination in the workplace, Catherine makes the point that they're more likely to leave their jobs, which will make them more likely to rely on their partner for earnings or start drawing from their pensions earlier, which is, of course, a case of discrimination. And like with the podcast that we did with Catherine a few weeks ago, and kind of all the thought leadership that Catherine's been putting out around this, she doesn't just point out the issues, she also comes up with solutions, and she points these out in the article as well. So she points to a really good solution, which is companies and businesses putting together menopause policies, and stuff like that will give female employees the tools to understand how to approach their managers about this subject. And then she also gives some tips to gaffers and bosses on what they can do to support their staff who are going through the menopause. So these are practical things like desk fans and rest areas in the workplace, but also things like flexible working are also very, very useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And you did mention there the podcast that we had a couple of weeks ago. I definitely recommend going and having a listen to that. It also has Holly Rubin, who's a psychotherapist and counsellor at the Soak in London, and she's got even more insight and thoughts on how to address this issue. So I think I'll move next onto our family team, Liam.
Yes.
Because Jane Martins from our family team, she has been watching the series. I don't know if you've heard of it, The Split.
I have indeed. It's on BBC iPlayer.
But yeah, she's been watching the Split, and she, she's been reviewing it from the perspective of how realistic it is. So I think she takes a pretty pragmatic view that there are obviously things that they've added that aren't quite accurate for entertainment value. But she has a very good. She sees it as very good that the main character is a strong proponent of good divorce, which obviously Jane and all of our family team here have been on the side of, no fault divorce and people having more amicable and constructive separations. Lawyers are not wanting to make people be at each other's throats or anything in this kind of process. They're here to, basically make the process go as smoothly as possible instead. So,
of course,
I think it sounds like the show, I haven't personally watched it myself, but it sounds from what she's saying that the show, presents it in a positively light, but perhaps isn't the most accurate representation of what family solicitors do.
Well, of course, you get this in any profession. So whenever there's a medical drama on or a police drama, you always get GPs and detectives saying, oh, well, it's not actually like that. That case wouldn't present itself in that way. That being said, it is easy for people to be pernickety in these situations. But I think what Jane does, and it's a 3-part series that she writes about The Split. She's provided some really great analysis, and that was originally published in Edward Fennell's Legal Diary, but we have republished that on the RWK Goodman website. And as Ed said at the beginning of the show, you can find that at rwkgoodman.com/info-.
Yep, and I'd also say go and listen to the podcast we did a few weeks ago with Jane on no fault divorce itself. It's very quick. I think it's under 20 minutes long, and she gives a really, really good kind of summary of what no fault divorce is about, how it's come about, and why it's a good thing. So,
and of course, go watch The Split on BBC.
Oh yeah, of course, well. Yeah. We're not funded by the BBC, but yeah, please do go and do that. And give us your thoughts. That would be fantastic. So yeah, I mean, there's plenty going on. There's lots more on the Info Hub going up every day. I'm seeing even more from the employment team on TUPE transfers and liability in that situation, data subject access requests. There's case studies of some mergers and acquisitions we've done. Also, that's been released in the last week also is our latest edition of the Team Around the Client magazine. 7th edition, I believe, which was put together for the Babacom conference, which is taking place today and, at the time of recording today, and going on to the end of the week, I believe, of which we are one of the headline sponsors. So it's looking at the theme of Down But Not Out, which is the theme of the Babacom conference, and it's got a whole range of articles in there of professional sports people who've had injuries either during the course of their sport or they have had a pre-existing disability and have learned to enjoy sport and play to the top of their game. Martin Sinclair, professional footballer, features in there, and lots more. So yeah, I definitely recommend people go and have a look at that. I'd also like to point out that the health and social care report that we did recently is still there. It's still available, Emerging from the Storm, looking at how the social care sector has emerged from the storm of COVID. And that can be found at rwkgoodman.com/social care storm. And actually, Liam, there is something new on the horizon as well.
Go on.
Well, if you are in the market for a merger or an acquisition, maybe you're buying, maybe you're selling, our corporate team is putting together a report of their own on the current state of the mergers and acquisitions market, what's putting pressures on it, supply chain issues, maybe it's changing expectations in the workforce that might be putting pressure on the process. So yeah, definitely keep an ear out for that one. We'll have more on that in the next few weeks, hopefully.
We will indeed. And speaking of what we've got coming up in the next few weeks, thank you for making it this far through this cop-out of a podcast.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
But fear not, we have put far more effort into future ones. So in the next few weeks, we're going to be speaking to Lizzie Painter, who's a construction lawyer, about all things construction. We've got a really interesting episode coming up about classic cars and kind of the fraud that goes on in the buying and selling of those. And that's a subject that is really a niche, especially when it comes to like the legal aspect of it. But it's absolutely fascinating. So do tune into that episode. And we mentioned Jane Martins from the RWK Goodman family team earlier in this episode. We'll have more with the family team coming up in the next few weeks as well.
Yep. So make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. You might be on YouTube, give us a like, do all that sort of thing. I guess all that's left to say is thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.